Welcome to another episode of VNture podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Amar, and together with Tauros, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. In this episode, we talk friendships, more specifically, friend groups, the group dynamic, how they interact, how they cause all sort of trouble for each other, and how they put each other on the spot. All because they are friends. So Tauros, my dear friend, when will you read Evenical?
Haha, I don't know. I think Nickel is actually pretty low on the backlog. I don't know if you'll ever be able to convince me, MR.
Oh,
I'm joking,
how
I'm
could
joking.
you?
It looks interesting. However, right now, I do want to talk about some of the best friend groups I've seen in visual novels, and one that obviously springs to mind right away is Majikoi. Majikoi, on the face of it, has a pretty standard premise. Main character is a high school boy, and the visual novel details all of the misadventures he and his friends get into at a high school specifically tailored for martial arts and dueling others. However, Majikoi's strength lies in its banter, the writing, the characters, all of the misadventures they get into. It's the sort of thing that's not immediately obvious that you can describe in a premise, but it's one of the best praises I can give it is that while I'm reading it, I usually had a big old dumb smile on my face because of all the nonsense they got into that was just genuinely entertaining. And a big factor of that is the friend group in Majikoi. The main character actually has like a pretty big friend group. I want to say 6 or 7 others, and all of them have their own standout personalities. And more than that, they all really interact with each other in group settings very often. They all walk to school together. Most of them are in the same class. They usually train together too. And of course, they live in the dorms generally. I don't mean it to say that, all of them spend 24/7 in just one big clump. Even when they're, somewhat separated and splintered, they're still interacting with each other, making, these other characters a part of their lives. Even though they all have their own interests, they still bond over things. Because that's somewhat how it is realistically, even if you have a big group of friends, there's still 1 or 2 people who have their own niche interests that they interact with. And you don't often see visual novels have this much effort and thought put into the finer points of these kind of big social interactions. Majikoi, however, really dives all in on these sorts of little group interactions, and I think it shines all the brighter for it.
From what you always talk about Magicoi, right? You always describe it beyond what a typical VN tends to portray the friend group. Because the typical VN generally portrays a friend group as, okay, they became friends because the same school and or class. The end. What you tend to say, beyond that even, is the friendship dynamic in the friend group persists beyond the school walls, as well as they have a common goal that unites them. In this case, a martial arts, right?
Mm-hmm. That whole martial arts goal is, most of them, it's mostly for the heroines, and to a certain degree some of the guys, but in their own different ways. Exactly, it's like I mentioned, I don't mean to reduce all of them as to just one clump. It's very often, many individuals who simply all have a blast together. You mentioned that about other visual novels too, how, in some of the most bare bone examples, you have the main character, you have his guy best friend who he just talks to every once in a while, and then you've got the possible heroine love interests who he interacts with on a 1-to-1 basis, revolving throughout the common route.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario, You could say they're all friends and stuff, but it's, what you're reading isn't really lining up with what they're telling you,
True, I agree. And I believe part of the reason is the framing is the only commonality they have is the school. That's it. And well, to contrast that with Magical, you said that they have intersecting interest. Again, just beyond the school, beyond the martial arts, just some interest, and that alone is a bonding time. It's such an improvement. Sounds so obviously trivial, right? Oh god, commonalities. Yeah, but it shows an effort.
There's another aspect I really like that Majikoi handles, in that it shows how they all got together. We do see flashback scenes of them as kids, getting together and hanging out in the fields and back meadows, playing sports and stuff. And what really sells it for me is that not all of them were together at first. You had several of them, and then later Momoyo came around, and then later it was Miyako, and then much later, in high school, kind of when the event takes place, Chris and Yukie get involved as well. So you have the idea of this evolving over time, of how people have their own lives and theirs intersects with the main characters as time passes. It's also great because Momoyo has the story of her trying to take over as the leader of the kids. And Captain is the guy to defend them, and they get into a whole fight about it, and then he earns her respect.
So like an origin story of a rival.
Exactly.
That sounds so funny.
So you also get to see that little bit of character development at the beginning. It's obviously not just this, but there's a few more instances, and you get the feeling that these people really have grown up together. On the flip side, there's still more character development once you get into a few of the routes. Miyako in particular is great for showing off the problems involved. In that, in her route, without going into too much detail, she basically becomes a problem. And the friends obviously want to help her, but it's still a tense situation, and they're trying, and she's, like I said, causing difficulties, and it's one of those things where like, oh, is this going to mess things up for the band? And seeing how that route develops and seeing how the other characters try to approach things in their own way and how things get resolved, it ties a lot into all the little delicate balances that goes on. Not just with the group as a whole, but like I said as before, the individual relationships. They are a friend group, but still, one character to another character is still very different. They're unique.
Hearing you, I mention Magically every single time. Again, full disclosure, I haven't read it, right? So I can just assume and interpret what you say, right? It sounds to me that it's so much more personal character to character rather than, oh, you're part of the band, right? But rather than that, it's okay, for one reason or another, be it past, be it interest, those characters interact with a special way between themselves.
Exactly. Like I said, it's one of those intangibles that make Magikoi stand out so much to me. It's like, I wish there was a more obvious way to advertise it, like the screenshots that you see on the Steam store page sort of thing. Because it's like, I guess in some ways that makes Magikoi a little bit like its own like secret treasure or whatnot. I remember there was one part that really stuck out to me, is that Magikoi has like bonus H-scene epilogues for some of the character routes. And for whatever reason, no one else shows up in these, I guess, H epilogues. Like, if you have one about Momoyo's route and it's more H scenes with Momoyo, none of the other characters show up. It's literally just,
okay.
The silent MC, because he doesn't have voice acting. And it's the voice actor for Momoyo. And it doesn't hit you until like a minute in that you haven't heard voice acting for any other character. And suddenly, that saps so much life out of Magikoi. Because even in the heroine routes, all the other characters are still around. They're still having fun events. They even still get the spotlight. And so when you suddenly go to these little bonus epilogue things and you wonder what the heck happened where they just couldn't get a whole group setting for the voice actors or whatnot, I don't know. But suddenly you realize just how much of the liveliness is gone. It's a good example of Majikoi showing you what you took for granted, and that gave it so much of its charm until the stark reality of the opposite hits you in the face.
Yeah, because for as much praise you give Magicai, the popular meme of VNs with character routes is whenever you pick someone, the rest disappear, right?
Exactly.
And you say, no, Magicoi does it very well. They are all part of that character life because it's important for the friend group. Obviously, unique dynamics to persist, fine, but they are still important. But then you say that there is beyond that route an extra chapter in which, for some ungodly reason, Magically reverts into, the rest just vanishes. Goodbye.
Exactly. I don't get it. And, honestly, that was a huge mark against this bonus content, I suppose you could say. But it's the sort of thing that at least made me appreciate the friend group dynamic of Majikoi that much more. And truly, that's one of Majikoi's strengths. Whenever I think back to that VN, the first thing that comes to mind is the banter.
Whoever designs banter that resonates with you, right? That means that person understood the basics. You need to create a distinctive vibe between characters, which will reflect the relation. That's it. And it pays so much when you do it right.
Absolutely. So yeah, as water is wet, and here I am gushing about Majikoi.
What else is new, right?
Oh, well, okay. Well, how about this then? What do you have, MR? You have something new? You're going to tell me all about Evanickel again?
Yeah. It was in the plans. I had it. But I felt like, you know what? I want to game the system. I know if our topic is bad friend groups, you'll bring Magicoi. So I need to bring something spicier. So if you bring the friend group, the established friend group with all the relationship, I need a lone wolf. So I brought Grisaya. Okay. So the best friend group aspect in Grisaya. It features a story with a school for people with very peculiar backgrounds. The setting. The school for a society rejects in a way. And here comes our protagonist, a very cold person and a reject in his own way. He goes to this barely attended school of totaling 5 students. In the entire school, by the way. It's not like the others disappeared or not shown. No. It's actually 5 students in the entire school. And he is the outsider to the group. The characters themselves have the friend dynamic, some more colder than others, in their unique ways, because of the background they had. But protagonist from the outside view sees how they all interact, and it's so funny to see how he is characterized by that lone wolf aesthetic that he cannot, for the longest time, just fit in. And he slowly earns their trust, slowly tries to interject, but because of his cold nature, he is called so many times tsundere, and that becomes the running joke between those characters, because ultimately, in the heart of it all, there is a reason why he attends this school, because he longed a normal life, a normal school, and that was the only chance he got. And so it's like very interesting seeing a perspective, someone who is completely from the outside, for one reason or another, that will be explained in a sequel. He grew up the way he did. And there is a barrier and distance that he creates that is very hard to breach by himself. So this is why I took Grisaya as a contrast. As a title, in which the protagonist slowly tries to fit in with a pre-established friend group. And over the course of the story, he will become the center of attention, as it were. Like, hey, there is something deeply satisfying about the journey when you look from the last title and how he is in the group, and contrast that with how he started as a person who barely speaks and just observes.
From the sounds of it, it's really a character journey for the main character. And that's a very interesting slant on the whole friend group topic, is that you have these people and the main character is an outsider, I guess, to this group of outsiders themselves. And it's about opening up, and it's about him becoming an accepted part of it, and it's about him, evolving into a better person. And
yes. And there's one similarity that when you described Magicoi that I realized. Because this title has a prequel that doesn't feature MC, but features the rest of the cast and how they grew into the friend group they had before the MC joined.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they actually had the same, or at least similar origin story that you talked about in Magicoi, how the first student arrived, and that has to be creepy to be the only student in a special school. Right? Like, that's an isolating feeling. Then you have another other student. So just by the proximity, you didn't really have a choice. So you bonded, even however clumsy that went. And then slowly and surely other people arrived, and maybe those social rejects found a way to bond, however faulty it may be. And that became their vibe. They're not all there, let's call it like that, for one reason or another. But they found common ground. They found how to accept and tolerate each other oddness. Like, hey, that's a very sweet prequel. And I realized that when you mentioned that Magicoi, like, this is exactly what happened in Grisaya. I really appreciate how the prequel told how that group came to be.
You mentioned, I think there's 5 characters, there's 5 other heroines, there's 5, I guess you could say 5 people in the friend group then, is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's still got to be extremely small. Considering they're the only students in the entire school, that's a very different dynamic than what you would see out of like 5 kids who are friends in a classroom full of other students. It's a totally different vibe, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like they, to the best of their ability, they try to emulate what would be in a normal school, because believe it or not, they are also divided into 2 classes.
What?
Yeah.
It's split up even worse. Oh dear.
Yes, exactly.
This poor school. You mentioned though. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
With Grisaya being a story about characters who are quite odd in their own ways.
Yeah.
This is a story that's, I suppose you could say this is a character-focused drama, ultimately, right?
Yes, I would say so.
However, and of course in the common route, you lead up to it with all sorts of comedy and getting to know the characters, right?
Exactly. And Grisaya is, I don't know, famously or infamously known for a huge common route. Very long.
Oh, I didn't know that actually.
It's very, very long.
So you have a really long common route full of the comedy and getting to know each other, and I guess partially getting accepted inside. And then when it comes down to the individual heroine routes, when it focuses on them and their situation in life, how do you think the whole friend group thing plays into the individual routes?
Relating to what you said about Magicoi, I feel like it's a step down, meaning it suffers a little bit from the syndrome of others disappearing to the ether. But I think it might be because of the stakes. Because the drama and character backstories you'll have to tackle on routes are on a totally higher level than let's win a tournament. It's very hard to explain when some sort of mega corporation get involved, and it's like it's a higher stake. So there's a reason why there's less of your friend group involved, even though when it makes sense they do appear.
Okay.
Because exactly as you explained the friend dynamics in Magicoi, in Grisaya, the reason common route is so lengthy is because the protagonist tries the best he can, often clumsy, to get in on the in-jokes, on the hijinks that other characters and how they interact with each other. And the combination of all those funny moments is quite varied, depending on which character is either made fun of or is currently playing the role of what can I say? I don't want to say Joker, but making the funny scene happen, right, and center of attention.
The class clown.
Yeah, kind of like that. Made fun of because she's very dutiful, so she will do everything. So everybody exploits that by saying, "Yeah, I would do my own lemonade, but you would definitely enjoy it more," right? So, something like that.
I know it's a frequent joke about heroine common routes for the whole rest of the cast to disappear, but on the flip side, it does give more emphasis to the one character, especially when you're getting into more serious matters, like, for example, their backstory or their own personal situation or the relationship between the heroine and the main character. And to be fair, oftentimes having side characters around splitting the spotlight doesn't really contribute much. Magicoi is a different case because they're kind of intrinsically involved, and they specifically set out to keep group events related to whatever's going on with the main heroine in her route. But in something like Grisaya, where you have this very personal topic in the route, then I mean it makes sense to have the other characters out. It's unfortunate, and it kind of feels a little contrived for the story to just suddenly write them all off. But still, it's supposed to help, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because exactly like you mentioned, because how those character-driven routes focus on a relationship with those chosen heroine with a protagonist, but I would even argue their own relation with themselves and how they can move past what defined them. They go in way more depth, leaving not that much space for other characters to be featured. They tend to play a supporting role. They tend not to disappear completely, but for one or another, they aren't featured. Because the stakes are often that high.
It all sounds very interesting. I'm glad. As long as the story, is successfully pulled off. That's the most important part. I know we're here talking about friend groups, and obviously we'd like to see more characters leave their mark. At the end of the day, the visual novel is carried by the story, and so that needs to have the proper build-up and climax and resolution in a route, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah. And I feel like what they do one great job of, Grisaya, is throughout that exploration of all the characters, you get scraps and just pieces of information, but you never truly discover what this MC all about, main character. Because he's definitely not one of those self-insert, but rather a pre-established one. So by the end of the first Grisaya, while they did flesh out all the characters, the one longing a reader has is like, wait, but what about the Yuji? What about him? Huh?
Mhm.
And that's when the sequel hits you, right? That's how they all coalesce.
The sequel. There you go. That's how they hook you in for whenever they
Yeah.
put out the next one. Haha.
Exactly. Yep. That's how they get you.
Yeah, you really liked me Grisaya, huh?
Yeah. I definitely. It's one of those. It's very hard to talk about why precisely I like it because I definitely do not want to spoil the experience. But I would say the way protagonists grow and gets accepted to the bunch of rejects is touching. It's touching, really is.
Nice.
So yeah. But now, changing the topic from the titles we haven't read, one of us, right? I haven't read Magica, nor you did, Irisa. Let's get to the common ground. Let's talk about Movlov, okay? Oh boy, okay.
To be honest, I want to come right out and say this because it's something we talked about a little prior to this episode.
Yeah.
I don't think the main friend group of Muv-Love is all that special. They seem to be good classmates, and in the case of Alternative, they seem to be good soldiers in training and whatnot. But as far as standout friend groups, I really wouldn't rate Muv-Love all that highly.
Okay. Can you say precisely why?
Yes, I mean, they do get along, and they do talk with each other, and they do have a lot of fun getting into nonsense. However, it's the kind of thing we were talking about earlier, where it seems somewhat limited to just them being friends out of convenience. Where it's just, well, yeah, they're in the same class, so they hang out together, or, of course, an alternative, they're soldiers, and they have to trust each other with their lives. And they have that bond to each other, of course, I'm not arguing that. It's just that when you're in the classroom, you don't get that sense that they're, buddies for life sorts of things. And when they're in the alternative sort of verse, you don't get that sense that they're all that deeply friends. It's more if they're on the clock and they have a mission and they're together working for the solution. But it's like, if anything, it felt like there was the stark difference between the two of them, in between Extra and then in between Alternative. When it was an Extra, it was like, yeah, they were friends and all, but it didn't really go much deeper than that. And then in Alternative, it's like, well, you have these deep bonds, but I don't really feel any other friendship. It made it very entertaining from a storytelling perspective, especially in highlighting the two different worlds Takaru lived in. But as far as like of outstanding friend group, no, I don't really see it.
Okay. So let me say it like that. On the surface, right? If I were to rate the day-to-day school hijinks, I would tend to agree. They had a unifying force in chaos that Maya brought from the beginning of the Extra, because let's start with Extra, right? And she, by appearing from the very wealthy conglomerate, the Zaibatsu company, all the chaos ensues from her, right? She's the unifying force, she's the talk of the town, and she circles around Takeru, and then hijinks ensues. Okay, so fine. A convenience of having that character and being in the same class in school. But then, for me, what makes the friend group special is the moments. And I probably mentioned that before, and I'll mention it again. It's all about the birthdays. Like, that one moment, that event when they celebrated birthdays, is probably one of the highlights for Mobile Extra. And maybe that also showcased my approach, because I really believe celebrations with your friends is something to be treasured, and giving presents is not easy. And the best presents always represent what you know about the other person, and that's exactly what happened. All the presents that Takeru got were their representation of what they know about him, and I feel like that's very touching. Yes, Tucker was behaving like a baby because he really wanted the new game console. Sure, I get that. But everybody gave their presents that represented both. They know he wants a console, and they gave him a game that represents themselves. And there are no better presents like that. I know very well that the best presents I gave and received from my friends are the ones that represent what they know about me and what I know about them. So that, for me, just elevates Move when it comes to friend group from those special moments that are testament of what they know about each other. Because that transcends the mundane, oh, just set up because schoolmates. No, they had to know each other. They had to spend some time. And even Maya herself says it's the best when she says, I'm jealous of other people who spend so much more time with you than me. Like, damn, think about that.
Okay. Yeah, those scenes and those lines obviously belie a lot of the trust involved and how much they value each other. For me, I guess just what sticks out more than that, I suppose you could say more of a lasting memory, is that whole lacrosse arc.
Okay.
And I don't mean to say that you're wrong or anything, it's just the impressions I get are different, where you have this entire part in Love Extra, where it's about them taking part in winning a lacrosse tournament. And it's about the Takeru being the manager and watching all his friends try to work together to arrive to victory. And instead, we get a lot of disagreements and butting heads. I understand that the whole point of the arc was kind of to show them overcoming it and rising to the challenge and whatnot. But overall, I felt that resolution was pretty weak.
Okay.
And basically, it wasn't quite the clear-cut story of friendship triumphing over to overcome all obstacles. Like this, I feel like the story was intending for it to get written as. And instead, it more left me feeling that these are people who get along fair or fine enough when they're in the classroom and whatnot. But aside from that, there's still the differences, and they still have their own issues with each other. Again, I mean, that's pretty realistic, to be honest, and that's totally fine. Yeah. It's just, I don't really consider this Love Band to be like one of the highest examples of a friend group in visual novels, you know?
Okay. And now my question is, do your opinion is kind of skewed about, because you said the lacrosse, and to be honest, I wasn't even thinking about lacrosse event in relation with the friend group, full disclosure. Okay. And do you think that opinion is skewed because having a sporting event by which the MC is the main tactician has been done infinitely better in Magicai? No.
I read Love before Magicai.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But now we're talking about your opinion now.
Exactly. No, I mean, I still had that opinion even before when I read Love Extra. To be honest, apparently a lot of people hate that lacrosse stuff, and I didn't mind it that badly. But like I said, in relation to now, and in relation to how Takeru acted, and how his friends worked together, and how there's that one girl whose name I don't remember who wound up filling in and feeling like just another replaceable part of this friend group. It's
that's true.
Yeah, a lot of it just kind of just takes away from the final message, and I couldn't really get on board.
Yeah, that's true. There was that character. I don't have her on the list of characters to remember the names of. So I'm like, yeah, all right, there was that. Oh, poor girl.
I mostly remember that because there's a CG of them all with their heads together from the view from the ground up. Oh, so it's them in a circle. And I remember because it's there's all the main characters. And then that one chick who somehow just randomly got herself into a CG.
Who are you again?
And it was like, oh, okay, we never see you again. But that's a cool.
True. That's true. Hey, again, maybe that's even realistic, like you mentioned, but oh my god.
Very true.
I remember that.
So all in all, I mean, Love Love was good. I liked the friends, and for what it's worth, especially the execution with like the banter and all the moving sprites in the background anytime they were in class.
Yeah.
Oh, that went a long ways to, showing how lively they all were. It's, there's only so much I like them though.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's agree to disagree.
Oh,
And
yeah.
on that note,
Totally.
and on that note, I think this is it. This is it for our friend group retrospective session. Thank you for all our listeners for this episode, and tell us in the comments what was your favorite best friend group in a VM.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for listening, and we hope to see you next week. VNture out.
VNture out.